February 13th, 1542. The stones of the Tower of London bite cold against her thin shoes. Catherine Howard, just 19, walks slowly, prayer book clutched in trembling hands. The scaffold awaits. The executioner's axe glints. And yet, she walks. Not as a queen, but as a girl trying not to cry. The night before, she asked for the block, not out of rebellion, but to learn how to die well. They brought it to her chamber. She practiced where to place her head, how not to flinch. A young girl rehearsing her final bow. It wasn't courage, it was fear in its rawest form. 18 months ago, she had worn a crown, silk, jewels, the scent of roses in her chamber. Now her world smells of damp stone and iron. What happened? How does a girl become a queen, then a prisoner, then a name in the scaffold's whisper? 1540, Henry VIII, a king decaying from the inside. His leg ulcerated, his eyes sunken, his hope brittle. He meets her, Catherine, just a teenager, lively, naive, smiling too brightly. To him she is spring. To her, he is winter, but with gold. She had no royal blood, no fine education, orphaned young, raised in a noble house without warmth. The Duchess of Norfolk's home was not a place of protection, but a maze of secrets. Girls slept side by side in the maiden's chamber. There were whispers in the dark, and touches. At 13, she had her first encounter. Henry Mannix, her music teacher. Older, inappropriate. He taught her more than songs. He touched her where no teacher should. She didn't understand. She thought it was affection. It was something else entirely. At 15, she called someone husband. Francis Derham, her grandmother's secretary. It was more than whispers. They met in the dormitory, held hands, promised things. In the language of children pretending to be grown. They weren't secretive. They were just foolish. By 16, those memories faded as she arrived at court. A lady in waiting. Her beauty bloomed fast. The king noticed. His gaze lingered. She smiled politely, unaware that smile would chain her to a destiny soaked in blood. July 28th, 1540. The wedding bells rang. Only 19 days after the king's previous marriage ended. He called her his rose without a thorn. She tried to smile, but the weight of the crown settled heavy on her shoulders. He was old, sick. She was terrified. Palaces replaced dormitories, jewels replaced promises. The king gifted her everything except youth, joy, or tenderness. She danced for him, kissed his ulcered hands, pretended she didn't gag from the scent of rot. Outside she was queen. Inside she was still just Catherine, lost, lonely, and craving warmth. The king adored her, or what she represented. Youth, beauty, the illusion of rebirth. He lavished her with dresses stitched in gold, pearls, estates. But every kiss felt colder than the last. She was married to a shadow of a man, not a husband. She smiled through feasts. She giggled during court dances. But behind closed doors, the smell of Henry's rotting leg filled their chambers. He couldn't walk unaided. He needed to be carried. Her heart beat not with love, but with dread. And then, a pair of eyes. Thomas Culpeper, handsome, gentle, a courtier with a dangerous charm. Their glances turned into words, words into letters, and letters into late-night meetings behind locked doors. Jane Rochford, her lady-in-waiting, made it possible. The same Jane who once accused Anne Boleyn now arranged stolen moments for another queen. She knew the risks. But Catherine was desperate. In Culpeper she found youth. In Culpeper she felt human again. But danger wasn't only ahead. It stirred from the past. Francis Derham returned, her old husband. He threatened to reveal their history. Catherine, in panic, appointed him as her secretary. A fatal miscalculation. Now whispers grew louder. Scribes murmured. Servants exchanged glances. And the Duchess's household, full of people who remembered the old Catherine, became a well of secrets ready to spill. Summer 1541. The royal couple toured northern England. In the evenings, as the king dozed in pain, Culpeper and Catherine vanished into quiet corners. Jane stood watch. They played with fire in the dark, thinking the night would protect them. But betrayal came not from the bed, but from the pulpit. John Lascelles, a Protestant with ties to Catherine's past, wrote a letter, not to her, not to the king, but to Archbishop Cranmer, the man closest to the royal ear. Cranmer hesitated. This wasn't just gossip, it was potential treason. He left the letter for the king in the chapel. When Henry read it, silence fell, then a fury that made walls tremble. He ordered an investigation, quiet, swift, merciless. One by one, the truth rose like smoke. Manox, Derham, Culpeper, Jane. Witnesses testified, evidence piled up. And then, a letter. From Catherine to Culpeper, inked with longing. I wish I were in your arms, for it would be a relief to my heart. It was the sentence that sealed her fate. The king stared at the letter. A love note from his queen to another man. The girl he called his rose without a thorn had pierced his pride. He wept, not quietly, loud guttural sobs before his council. Then silence, then rage. He shouted for a sword, swore he'd kill her with his own hands. But he didn't. Instead, he vanished from court, riding into the night like a ghost. He never looked at her again. Catherine didn't understand, at first. Guards arrived without reason. Her doors were locked. No explanations, just silence and suspicion. She paced, waited, doubted, prayed. Then came the whispers, the accusations, the names from her past. Her blood ran cold. She ran through the palace, screaming for the king. My husband, Henry! But no door opened. No voice answered. Just guards who dragged her back. On November 7th, 1541, she was stripped of her title. No longer queen, just Mistress Howard. Her fate handed to strangers in robes. They sent her to Sion Abbey, a prison dressed as a convent. There, under cold interrogation, she admitted to her past with Derham. She begged forgiveness for what she did as a child, but denied adultery. No, she said, not with Culpeper. Her voice trembled with truth or fear. It didn't matter. Truth bent easily beneath pain. Derham was arrested, tortured. Culpeper too. Screams echoed in the tower's dark chambers. Bones cracked, skin tore. Under agony, Culpeper said he desired the queen. That was enough. In December, judgment fell. Culpeper, noble by birth, was allowed the mercy of the axe. Derham was not. He was hanged, cut open, his entrails burned before his eyes. Alive. Catherine's past cost more than her future. It cost lives. Parliament acted swiftly. A new law was written in ink and blood. A queen must reveal her sexual past before marriage. Silence, too, was treason. Even intent could lead to death. The law was Catherine's eulogy before her body even fell. She was 17 when she returned to the Tower. Older than when she married, but smaller somehow. Her world had narrowed to 4 stone walls. The same place where her cousin Anne Boleyn had died. The Tower did not forget. Each morning, she awoke, hoping someone had changed their mind. Each night, she rehearsed how to die. Not out of courage, but because trembling in front of a crowd seemed worse than the axe. She spoke to no one. The tower's silence was heavier than any chain. She wasn't allowed visitors, no priest for comfort, no family for tears. Her voice, once used to sing at court, faded into whispers of prayers. She remembered her wedding day, the music, the feast, the way the king had smiled at her. She wondered if, even for a moment, he had loved her, or if she had only ever been a mirror for his lost youth. The guards began preparing the scaffold. She could hear the hammers, the thuds. the wood. Each sound a countdown. She stopped eating. She couldn't keep anything down. Her body rejected survival. February 12th. A priest was finally allowed in. He brought her a small prayer book. She held it so tightly it left creases in her palm. He said she could make peace with God. She nodded, but her heart stayed heavy. She asked again for the block. She wanted to practice. The guards hesitated, then relented. And so, for the second time in her life, Catherine Howard knelt before death. Only this time, it watched her. She laid her head down, moved her hair aside, again and again, over and over, until her neck no longer trembled. It wasn't morbid, it was method. She wanted control over at least one thing, her ending. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, counted the cracks, imagined Culper's smile, wondered if her body would be buried beside her cousin's, wondered if anyone would even cry. Dawn arrived without warmth. The tower courtyard filled with cold fog and quiet footsteps. Outside, people gathered, not out of hatred, but hunger for spectacle. They didn't know her, only her sins. She was brought out in a simple gown, no crown, no jewels. Her legs buckled, they had to hold her up. The prayer book was still in her hands, now damp with sweat. Her eyes scanned the crowd, but found no mercy. She climbed the steps slowly, one foot then the other. The scaffold groaned beneath her weight. Or was it the weight of history? Anne Boleyn had stood here once, now Catherine. Cousins, queens, condemned. The executioner stood, waiting, hooded, still. His axe already rested on the block. Catherine tried not to look at it, but it was all she could see. The glint, the edge, the final answer to every question she'd ever asked. Her hands trembled as she clutched her prayer book. She wanted to speak, to say something brave, something remembered, but her mouth was dry, her thoughts scattered. The crowd blurred into shadows. The guard asked if she had final words. She nodded. Her voice barely broke the cold air. "I die a queen, but I would rather die the wife of Thomas Culpeper." Silence fell, the kind that bruises. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was the truth, raw, reckless, and real. In that moment, she wasn't a queen. She was just a girl who had loved and been punished for it. She turned to the executioner, her voice steadier now. "Please, make it quick." He nodded. No theatrics, just precision. She knelt, moved her hair, just like she had practiced. The wood was cold, familiar. The crowd held its breath. No drums, no trumpets, just the wind brushing past like a final whisper. Catherine closed her eyes. Her lips moved in silent prayer. Or maybe a memory. Or maybe Thomas's name. One clean strike, that was all. The axe came down. Her body fell limp. Her head rolled gently aside. And with it, the last breath of a girl who had once danced through palace halls. There was no ceremony, no mourning. Her body was wrapped and taken to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, buried beside Anne. Two women reduced to bones under stone, two warnings, carved in silence. The king forbade anyone to speak her name. Her portraits were destroyed, her titles erased, but the echo of her story remained, not in the pages of glory, but in the quiet sorrow of those who knew how easily a crown can crush. The tower returned to stillness, the scaffold cleaned, the blood soaked into the wood. The crowd dispersed. No cheers, no tears, just London's gray sky swallowing another name. Henry VIII remained secluded. Those who dared approach said his eyes had gone dull. He no longer sang, no longer feasted. He merely existed, a man haunted by the ghost of his own rage. He married again, eventually, Catherine Parr, wiser, older, less threatening. But the spark he once found in Catherine Howard never returned. That part of him had died with her. Catherine's story at court became a caution, a lesson. Be silent, be pure, be obedient. Queens walked softer. Ladies-in-waiting whispered more carefully. Every laugh measured, every glance questioned. But outside the palace, her name was still spoken, in kitchens, taverns, among women, not as a villain, but as a girl who was too alive in a world that demanded silence. The law, passed after her death, remained on the books for over a century. A cruel ink that declared desire a crime, and love without permission, treason. No one marked her grave for centuries. No monument, no flowers. Just a name erased in fear. Only stone, cold, unforgiving. Forgotten by kings, remembered by ghosts, until Queen Victoria, centuries later, ordered plaques to be placed for those buried in the tower. Only then did Catherine's name find a place in marble. Small, quiet, but undeniable. Tourists now pass by it, barely slowing their steps. Some read the name and move on. Others pause, feeling something. They don't know why. Perhaps because tragedy has weight, even when history tries to make it light. She was a queen for 16 months, a prisoner for 3, a memory for 5 centuries. But her story still lingers, not because of what she did, but because of who she was when the world refused to see her. She had danced with light feet, laughed with open lips, worn gowns too heavy for her age. Yet the court only remembered her fall, not her beginning, not her music, not her laughter. Her love letters were destroyed, her belongings seized. Her story was rewritten by men who never heard her cry. They called her foolish, reckless, unworthy, but never human. If she had been born a peasant, her past would have been a whisper, not a weapon. But queens do not get the luxury of mistakes, only the certainty of consequences. Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, cousins in blood, tragedy, and fate. Both met the axe. Both died for love the crown could not accept. Both buried under the same roof, beneath the same curse. The tower guards still say her ghost walks the halls. A girl in white, barefoot, weeping, calling for the king who never came. Some laugh at the tale, others swear by it. No one ever asked Catherine if she wanted to be queen. No one offered her a choice, only dresses, titles, and a husband 3 decades older, and then a scaffold. She never ruled, never commanded armies, but she left behind something more powerful. A question. What becomes of girls born in the wrong time, with too much light in their hearts? Her story isn't just a warning, it's a wound, an echo of a system that crushed those it couldn't control. Catherine wasn't dangerous, she was simply alive. And that, in the end, was enough to kill her. Every young woman who walked through those palace doors after her walked differently. Eyes lowered, dreams tucked away. Catherine had dared to feel, and for that, the crown took her head. And yet, her name remains, not in glory, but in memory, not as a queen victorious, but as a girl undone, a rose with thorns, a heart with fire, a name history could not bury forever. Catherine once believed love could rescue her, that in Culpeper's smile she might find something pure. But in the court of Henry VIII, love was not a refuge, it was a sentence. She was not the only guilty one, but she was the only one who bled. The men who used her, judged her, betrayed her. They kept their names. She lost hers. Some say she was naive, others say reckless. But even now, centuries later, we rarely say the truth. She was 17, frightened, and alone in a game she never chose to play. The Tudor court loved its pageantry, until it didn't. The same people who bowed before her, who called her Your Majesty, were the first to turn when the crown cracked. Even her own family distanced themselves. The powerful Duke of Norfolk, her uncle, did not defend her. Her grandmother, who raised her, said nothing. Blood ties meant nothing in the shadow of royal wrath. And what of the king? Henry, who called her his jewel, his rose, allowed her to die without even hearing her final plea. Love turned to silence, silence turned to steel. Yet in her final moments, Catherine didn't beg for mercy. She did not curse the king, the court, or God. She whispered truth, that she would rather die as Culpeper's wife than live as Henry's queen. Those words haunted the halls for years, not because they were scandalous, but because they were honest. In a world built on masks, truth was the sharpest blade. Children born long after her death would hear her name and shiver. Some blamed her, some pitied her, but none could forget her. Because Catherine's story was not about royalty, it was about being human. The tower kept her secrets, but time could not. In every cracked stone and shadowed step, her memory remains, not as a fallen queen, but as a girl who dared to live and paid for it with her life. The years passed, but Catherine's story lingered in corners, whispers in the tower, a chill on the scaffold stairs. Her tragedy etched itself into the walls, unseen but never absent. In books, she became a footnote, the foolish wife, the unfaithful queen. But truth does not stay buried. And slowly, voices began to ask, what if the fool was not her, but history? Artists painted her with softness. Writers imagined her thoughts. Her eyes, once dismissed as vain, were now studied for pain. The girl once erased was being redrawn, carefully, lovingly. Modern historians unearthed letters, testimonies, context. They didn't excuse her, but they understood her. Catherine was no longer a symbol. She was a story, and stories change everything. In her lifetime, Catherine's choices were judged only by power, but in time they began to be seen through empathy. Not, why did she fall, but why was no one there to catch her? She was the mirror of an era, one that demanded perfection from women and punished them for seeking love, one that crowned girls and then blamed them for bleeding under its weight. Her death didn't just end a life. It created a silence, a space where women learned to fear their own voices, to be desirable but not desiring, to be adored but not alive. Yet Catherine's echo refused to fade, and in that echo, new generations began to hear not scandal but sorrow, not shame but strength. Her truth had outlived their lies. The Tower of London today is a tourist site, but for some, it's more. For those who stop at her plaque, close their eyes, and feel the weight of a crown never asked for, the silence still speaks. She wore velvet, she wore chains, she wore a crown, and finally she wore nothing but courage. Catherine Howard was more than the girl who lost her head. She was the girl who never lost her heart. Her name was stitched back into history, slowly, not by kings, not by nobles, but by those who knew how fragile a girl's life can be in the hands of power. In classrooms, her story is now told not with mockery, but with mourning. Students wonder what might have been. Had she been protected, not exposed? Had she been loved, not owned? She was never meant to rule. She was never trained to survive. But she still managed to leave a mark deeper than any policy or law. Her life became a mirror to an empire's cruelty. Her cousin, Anne Boleyn, had died for ambition. Catherine died for innocence. Both were buried as traitors. Both now remembered as women who stood too brightly in a world that preferred shadows. Some nights, it said, the bells of the tower sound softer, as if mourning something no one alive remembers clearly, but no stone can forget. She wasn't the most powerful queen, or the most clever, but she was one of the most human. And history, after centuries of silence, finally learned to say her name with tenderness. Catherine Howard, the girl who smiled too much, who trusted too easily, who paid too dearly, remains a quiet rebellion written into the bones of English history. Her tragedy is not only that she died, but that she never had a chance to live fully. A life rushed, edited, and ended by others, now retold in her own light. We remember her not to glorify pain, but to honor it, to see the cost of indifference, to understand that behind every royal painting once stood a child, trying to be seen. And so she endures, not as a queen of England, but as a queen of memory. Catherine Howard, a name once erased by fear, now carved into the story of every woman who dares to be more than obedient.